Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lizbeth Goodman. It's a pleasure to be here speaking about empowering learners with special needs. I'm just going to explain before I start my own talk that one of my colleagues, Jutta Trevoranis from Ontario College of Art and Design, Inclusive Design Institute, could not be with us today. She sends her regards, and I've brought her handouts, so circulating through the audience are papers about Jutta's talk. But instead, we have a very special guest, which is Dr. Mick Donegan, who will speak after me. So because Mick and I work together, we'll do a two-part talk. I'll speak, and then I'll introduce Mick, and then we'll do questions afterwards, if that's okay. I want to say just a few things before we start the talk. My talk is really a summary in 10 minutes of 15 years of work with people with special needs. And it starts from an artistic perspective. So at SMARTLab, which is the organization that I run, we believe that to empower all people of all types of learning ability and all types of physical ability, we need to provide tools and methods to enable everyone to engage equally in society, including through the arts. And probably what's unique about the program is that we work with dance, theater, film, and music primarily. So it's going to be a very compressed talk. I'm going to show you some tools we've developed over the past 12 years very quickly, talk over a range of examples, and then later on I can explain more. But it's really, I'm showing you in particular the examples about dance for women with physical disabilities, whether through accident, trauma, or other special needs, and also a range of intellectual disability projects for kids. Okay? And we start, as I start the video, with a quote from Rainer Maria Rilke, the poet, about our method. Basically, his method is our method, and this is it. It says, I beg you, have patience with everything unresolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves as if they were locked rooms or books written in a very foreign language. Don't search for the answers, live the questions now, live your way into the answer. This is key. And that's our method for working with people with special needs of all kinds. And these examples will show you very quickly how. I should say that for a long time, SMARTLab was all women, and I know that one of our colleagues is going to speak about the empowerment of women in particular. So some of these early examples might show how we've done some work in that domain early on. We recently moved to University College Dublin, but our keywords remain the same: innovation, universal design. We're transdisciplinary in nature. We are health professionals working with artists and technologists. And here begins a really quick trawl of work. So some 15 years ago, I was doing some dance work with Covent Garden, the Theatre Museum, Royal Shakespeare Company, and we started experimenting in physical mobility so that I had to limit my own body in the way that I would need to understand the needs of some of the dancers I would then work with. So professional dancers who had either lost their legs or lost the ability to move their legs, who we began to dance with and make robotic and 3D interface projections to enable them to create their own choreography, their own movement. That work evolved. We began to work with men with cerebral palsy, with adults as well as kids. There's a whole range of projects. The only one I have time in this brief talk to mention quickly is this work with Homer Avia. Homer danced with us just after his amputation. He was well known for the Merce Cunningham dance troupe and the Frankfurt Ballet. He developed cancer, and just after this amputation came back to dance, and we were very honored that he asked us to dance with him with the Isadora dance troupe. It turned out to be his last dance. He died the following week, but his partner asked us to keep this alive. Homer had wanted the video projection of this rehearsal, rough rehearsal footage, to keep his memory alive and to encourage people who were struggling to remember that they could still succeed physically and in every other way. Some of that work fed into some animation dance work that we did, so we began to work with various animation companies around the world, and with Lego Europe and the Carl Sagan Trust and the Children's Health Fund, and the Media Lab, the MIT Lab and the Stanford Lab and the NYU Lab, to make integrated dance performances. Virtual characters controlled by disabled children, and both able-bodied and disabled dancers moving together with 3D environments. And the key to all of the dance work is the disabled person is at the center. Whatever movement a disabled person can do is made the trigger for the 3D animation, for the flying creature. You see here some of the early motion tracking experiments, but what all this work leads to is that Bobby here, or Audrey, the dancer in the wheelchair you'll see in a moment, only Bobby and Audrey can release the 3D characters, the 3D creatures. The rest of us just support that movement and make it bigger so that it becomes a form of communication. So this work won the World Summit Awards and all of those types of projects, but then we took those awards and fed them into some more motion capture work with an integrated dance company called Counterbalance in Ireland, and then began to work with the BBC and went out to the NTU Game Lab in Singapore. We were their first residency company there, and started making virtual learning environments for kids with complex special needs, where every child, we worked in the hospital with every child and their parents or carers to develop a picture world, which was the world off the edge of their bed, the world that they wanted to live in, and the avatar that they wanted to be represented by, and then we created it in 2D and 3D as a design. We then went back and simplified that whole project for kids with very complex special needs at the Stephen Hawking School in East London. So here you see a different set of kids interacting with the same project. And for these kids, we stripped out the fancy interfaces, removed all the bright colors, some of the things that might trigger fits, but built more of the robotic interfaces, so more of the haptic controls, the biosensors, the breath controllers, and this robotic chair, which will move the body of a child who can't move her himself in relation to their customized 3D world. When we started this project, this was sponsored by the National Endowment for Science, Technology and the Arts. It was meant to be a 9-month project, and it's still running 6 years later, of course, because there was skepticism about what kids might really benefit from the robotic chair in the virtual world. But in fact, all the kids at the school use it, and we've been asked to build more and more. Even the kids who were assumed not to have the capacity to benefit from the movement benefited greatly, and there are now researchers looking at the impact of any robotic interface combined with an audio and vibration interface and a virtual 3D world. Crucially, that's designed by the children themselves. The stories have to come from the children and from the community. Another example, very quickly, we call this PORT, Performance Online in Real Time. This we developed in 2001 as a video dance project, a very simple, cheap way for people to manipulate their own video image. And this was created by Vesna Milanovic, the dancer here. But what we've used it for, and are still using it for, is for dance rehabilitation, or for people who want to move into a previous version of their body when it used to move differently, and take their own time in private to learn how to move how they move now. So it's an interface between the bodily movement of the present and of the past that can be manipulated with no knowledge of technology by anyone. And that's the beauty of it, really. So we use these in workshops with young children on up. But it was created by a dancer who was looking for her lost language of movement. And now, the Interfaces project, which is co-created with Dr. Mick Donegan here.
You'll see my eyes kind of moving around there, possibly at the bottom right-hand corner.
So this is James Brosnan, one of our colleagues with cerebral palsy, who co-created this project with us. And Mick Donegan introducing the eye control system, which he'll speak about in a moment. So Mick will explain in a few minutes how the eye gaze system works, how it enables people who can't move their bodies to interact and communicate. My part of the presentation is just about the creative impulse, the liberation that comes when a person who hasn't been able to play music live before is suddenly leading a professional band using eye controls. This footage is now about 4 or 5 years old, but I still use it because it was the moment when James played live. Clips that he had recorded with the musicians, but he played them live in front of an audience, and the professional musicians responded to him. So he's leading the jam. That's the key. And we take that for granted. Daniel here in Dublin is a victim of a stab wound, and Mick has been working with him with the eye control system in ways that have transformed Daniel's and his family's life. And that's more about communication, letting people know what he thinks and that he's capable of telling people what he thinks, which is not always clear if there's no other form of communication tool. So the eye control is key to that. And here Yoshi in Toronto, Geoffrey Shay here is a colleague of you to Trevor Annis in OCAD. His son Yoshi with cerebral palsy is making films using the eye control system and some basic film editing systems. So it's just a number of examples of the ways in which once there's a tool that enables a child or an adult to communicate, or to relearn a new form of communication if their body isn't working in the same way anymore. The various ways in which, not just for the person, but for the community around that person, community and creativity opens up. So quickly here, and these are my last examples before I introduce Mick. Katie Gilligan here, she's now 22. She has cerebral palsy. We met her in 2003 when I was commissioned to do an integrated dance piece for the Special Olympics in Dublin. Katie was then 18 and danced with us along with 16 other children with cerebral palsy. Katie's now an adult. When she left her special school, she was not supported, as is so often the case. So for several years, she didn't have a creative outlet. And then Mick came along and helped Katie to learn to use the eye control system. And just as James here has learned to write a book and to speak and to sing and crucially to play music, Katie wanted to dance, and she wanted to control her own dance. So she can't control an automated wheelchair herself, but she can now tell someone how she wants to move, so that one of us dancing with her just becomes part of Katie's chair. Katie is the dancer. So what I want to show you here is an example of, so this is a duet, we would call it. There happen to be 4 humans in the frame, but Bobby and I are just literally, think of us as part of the chair, which Katie and James are telling us how to move, and they're telling us with their eye movements, with a lexicon of meaning they created through the eye control system and taught to us. So that effectively, Katie and James have worked out a way of moving across the room the way that they want to dance in duet, and silently they tell us through their movement vocabulary, so that Bobby and I can move with them. And you can see how it transforms Katie's world to be a dancer as a young woman, an independent dancer choreographing her own piece. In the background, what you hear is a music score performed by a band called Keela in Ireland. But the score is called Katie's Tune, and it's a song about Katie's life and using the sound of Katie's internal vocal rhythms, which were recorded by amplifier on a guitar and then played into a song, so that the sounds you hear are literally Katie's voice mixed with a song, and this has just been released on a major world album. So Katie now has a number of forms of creative expression and a pride in her role in the world, which is the real key to that. There are many other examples that we could show, but the real point I would make is this: it's not so important whether someone using one of these systems wants to dance or sing or write or speak for the first time or play games for the first time, which is something Mick will speak about. It's important that everyone have the same opportunity to choose their form of expression, choose their form of engagement, enact it, and then share it in whatever way is meaningful to them. So that's my real point, and there are many hundreds of people working with me on these projects. Some of the credits come up here, and while the credits roll, I'll just introduce my colleague who can tell you much more, and it's really Mick behind so much of the work you've just seen. So Dr. Mick Donegan here, who will replace me at the podium, with a special needs teaching background, former deputy head of a special needs school, then the leading light at the Oxford ACE Centre, leading on assistive technology development for many years. We were privileged to get him to SMARTLab for a few years to work closely with us, and now running his own charity called SpecialEffect, which is really making a difference to children's lives. So Dr. Mick Donegan.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. I'm Mick Donegan, and Elizabeth might not have said that we'll both take questions after this my brief presentation. Hopefully you can hear me reasonably well. My particular focus, even though I work with as wide a range of technologies as possible, the particular focus for this session is eye control, is gaze control technology. Because for me, I've been involved in the development and the promotion of it for some time now, and for me it's a particularly powerful tool for aiding self-expression, whether for communication, for education, or, as Elizabeth says, creative expression through music, art, design, etc. Okay, here we go. Very quickly, as Elizabeth says, I'm an associate senior research fellow at University College Dublin. I also run my own charity, Those of you who know what England looks like, there's Oxfordshire just there with the OX. And we are in West Oxfordshire, which, as it happens, is where the Prime Minister lives, who has been kind enough to be very fulsome in his support for the work that we're doing. We opened the centre so that we can actually have visitors now with disabilities in March of this year. And he summarises what the work is about better than I can. He said, your work combines three things I'm passionate about: disability, leading-edge technology, and corporate social responsibility. I'm particularly passionate about cutting-edge technology because the world out there is like a sweet shop at the moment, more than ever, both in terms of very talented people, but also cutting-edge technology. And it's a case of putting those people, those technologies together to actually support people with disabilities by being aware of what their needs are. So, as I say, it's a sweet shop for me out there at the moment. It's very exciting. Okay. One of the things that the charity does, we work, as I say, with the full range of tools to help people express themselves creatively and through communication. I'm focusing on gaze control technology. We loan gaze control systems to people like little Lewis there, and we also support them. He was paralyzed following an insect bite, so he can no longer move. He was on holiday in the south of France and gradually became paralyzed, so he can only move his eyes. And we've created an activity that enables him to play music by using all his favorite TV characters. There's something called, I think that's Iggle Piggle from In the Night Garden, for those of you who are interested in that sort of thing. Here's a guy with motor neuron disease who we've helped. One of the things he really wanted to do was to be able to tell jokes, because he wanted to be able to go back to the golf club to tell jokes. And so we set him up with two different voices, so there could be the voice that says, you know, what is a so-and-so, 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 and then the answer could say, ah, da-da-da-da-da-da. And once we'd done that, he was able to go back to the golf club, meet with his friends again, and tell jokes. And also, he wanted to read books, so we set him up with a way of reading books independently by linking it with Kindle. Here's Adam, and this is a guy who had a stroke. He's also got nystagmus, severe nystagmus, which means he has difficulties moving in controlling his eye movement. And the things that were important to Adam are to be able to communicate, and even though he's got severe problems with his eye movement, by doing him a special interface with large targets and a coded system, he's able to write how he feels. And also, he wanted to be able to control his videos. And in this little clip, you'll see him controlling videos. I'll do this very quickly. This is the kind of interface, large blocks of text. If he wants the letter A, for example, he'll go to the A block, and then he'll have A, B, C, D, E, F on the screen, and he'll choose the letter A. So it's an easy way of being able to select letters to communicate, as you'll see in a moment. And this is on a support visit we made earlier this year. And yep, the bird's tweeting in the background there. He's got an eye control system. He's in bed there. And this is the interface to control his television. And he's just switched the television on there using the interface. And he's now on the left-hand side going back to where he left off, where he left the video the last time he was watching it, where he put it onto pause. And then he's watching the video for a little while. And then in a second, you'll see that he looks across. Oh yeah, here we go. He's going to control the volume now. So the volume's just going up there. And then he'll look across, because this was the first time he'd actually... oh yeah, he's actually going to tell me what he feels about the film now. So he went over to communicate. And for those of you who can't see, he's saying, I really like this film because it's atmospheric. And he's just spelling atmospheric. The next time he writes atmospheric, it'll have learnt that word as a prediction, so it'll be a bit easier. So he's just doing the I there, and then he goes to the C block and then chooses the C. So he's able to control his environment and to be able to communicate. I think just for the fun of it, in a second, he just sort of switches it off and then switches it on again. And this actually is the first time that he's smiled since the stroke. It was a special moment. Yeah.
Excellent. You're in control.
Because he was in control. Yep. And then he turns it back on again, so he's just showing off now. But the next guy that I show, as I say, he has head movement, but it's not controlled head movement. The only part of his body that he can control is his eye movement. And hopefully, Yeah, very quickly. I'll have to explain this very quickly, very briefly. This is a guy that I'm working with in Turin, a guy called Paolo. He, in my experience, is one of the most remarkable users of gaze control technology. I'm really sorry that the video isn't very good, but this guy doesn't need a grid. He uses his eye movement as a pointer, so it goes directly to what he wants on the screen, and using his eye control with an on-screen keyboard, he's able to do everything that everyone else can on the computer. So he's got his keyboard, he's got his mouse movement. And using that, he does web design, he's a web designer, and he also writes music. And here's Cubase, which is the program that he uses to write music. This is on a visit that I made last month, in fact, a support visit. He's got the system above his head. He's got a tracheostomy there, so he's breathing on a ventilator. It's actually 10 years since he had his tracheostomy. He's filled in some quality of life scales. Oh, sorry, here's his eye movement there. For those of you who can see it, he can move his, that's the pointer being moved by his eye, and it's far quicker than I can use a mouse, in fact, and far more accurate. So using that, in a second, he's just pulling up a file to play a music file. If you could just put the music up slightly now, please. And this is something that he wrote just by eye movement. So he's got drums, he's got vocals, he's got bass, etc. All day long he does web design, and every evening he writes music. And as I say, these quality of life scales that we were talking about, with these quality of life scales we were talking about, he actually scores very high on the quality of life scales, particularly following being able to use a gaze control system. Right, and finally, I just want to show you a child now, and this is a very brief, quick sort of 2 minutes of video which illustrates the difference that it can make to a child. I hadn't met this child up until just before the video starts. He's got athetoid cerebral palsy, which means he's got severe involuntary movement. He can only control, he can only control his eye movement. But in the video, I think you'll see that he's able to communicate. He can speak words, he can paint. You'll see a butterfly suddenly appear at one point on the screen where he paints a butterfly, and he also plays music. So he's able to do a wide range of things that without this technology he's unable to do. So without further ado, I'll just show you this clip. This is the kind of grid that he uses, the side that he uses, and the size that he uses, and this is the clip. So if you put the volume up, thank you.
Over his movements.
It was done for a children's TV program, so here we go.
And now he's getting a visit from Dr. Mick Donegan, who helped develop the MyToby computer, which you operate with just your eyes.
I'm Mick. It's nice to meet you. I'm just here to try and see if we can get this system working so that you can make things happen by moving your eyes around on the screen. So, it's just a bit of fun. If it works, great. If it doesn't, then I come back again until it does. Okay.
Mum is excited. If this works, Tim will get an instant voice for the very first time.
He'll need to be more or less here with his eyes about this distance.
Not all children like Tim will be able to make use of this machine. It's very sensitive, and a lot relies on Tim's eye control. Dad is excited too. Tim is a natural, and in no time, Dr. Mick has him playing the guitar.
D minor. I think we're doing a composition here. Excellent. Goodness me. I like it.
Dr. Mick is impressed at how quickly Tim has mastered the machine.
So where you look, you will see a butterfly appear. Hold your eye right there on that flower if you can. Okay, hold it right there. Without moving. Excellent. Whoa! You're doing really well. Really, really well.
And speaking is suddenly made quick and easy for Tim.
I'd like some more, please.
You'd like to do some more?
I think I like it.
Okay, so just to summarize there, here we go. Very quickly, we're talking about empowering. How can gaze control empower people? And here we go. Communication, access to education, music, art and design, games and leisure, environmental control, and much more. And the benefits, it's an impact on people's quality of life, positive impact, greater independence because people can communicate independently. One of the biggest frustrations of Adam, for example, was the fact that what he called, he used the word greenhorn, which is like an American word for people who don't know what they're doing, carers coming and trying to understand what he's saying and him not being able to get his message across. So, so self-expression, employment in some cases. Paolo is actually employed to do web design. Less painful. Amazingly, one of the biggest, most positive parts of the feedback, because I did a European project on gaze control, in terms of user requirements, one of the most frequent comments on the benefits of gaze control over any other form of access was that it is less painful than other forms of access, which surprised me hugely. It wasn't that it was quicker or anything else. It was actually that it hurt less, which I think should make all of us who are involved with assistive technology think very carefully. Socialization, a great opportunity to meet with other people, and as in the case of Lewis here, offer opportunities for more fun. So thank you very much. Thank you. And if you want to learn more, there's a book. If you Google IGI and my name and gaze interaction and applications of eye tracking, then I think that book's just available, and you can order it by the chapter, etc. And for further information, these are my two addresses, one at the university, one at the charity, and also I had an excellent visit to MARDA yesterday, and I just wanted to mention that they're doing excellent work at MARDA, and they would also be very happy for you to find out about gaze control and other technologies. So please, they said, please don't hesitate to contact them.